No Scotty Barnes for the Toronto Raptors, but Brandon Ingram and RJ Barrett led the way with a three-point barrage as rookie Collin Murray-Boyles dominated in his second game. The Raptors win in Sacramento and
the Yankees lose.
Let's go to the film room.
The only thing that's originally filmed is that and I've studied older films and tried to figure out how I got that impression. I always get amazed when I'm in the cutting room.
The unique thing about film is an art form.
Exactly.
Is the editing.
Collin Murray-Boyles nearly dropped a triple-double with 12 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2 blocks in his second game of his career and completely showcased what he provides on day one for this Raptors team. One way to describe Collin Murray-Boyles, or CMB, is activity. Even on the offensive end, despite not being a shooter, he finds a way to get himself involved in everything, whether that's being the secondary creator or knocking down three-point shots. He did one today. But overall, his impact on the defensive end has been massive. And I think part of that starts with the pickup points. He is so aggressive when it comes to picking up the basketball and pressuring ball handlers. Offensively, it's about activity and finding ways to impact the game without necessarily shooting the ball. So, for example, when Jamal Shead gets blitzed in a pick and roll, CMB is able to catch and make a quick play to Gradey Dick in the corner for a three. Back to the defense real quick, he just finds a way to involve himself in actions. When Dennis Schroeder drives, he's able to stunt the driving lane, and then a little bit later in the possession, he's able to completely wall off the paint from Dennis Schroeder, and it forces a shot clock violation. 6 assists for CMB in this game. A lot of them were on these wraparound passes, and one of his best defensive possessions of the game was stonewalling DeMar DeRozan at the end of the first half, poking out the ball without fouling. This is what I mean by activity. Sabonis gives him tons of space, but he utilizes that against Sabonis by setting a screen for Ja'Kobe Walter, who knocks down the corner three. He was all up in Sabonis' chest in this game. Even when Sabonis was trying to catch the ball, he would push him out so that instead of catching it at the three-point line, he would have to catch it near half court. One of the areas of growth for CMB will be being able to attack these closeouts here. So if teams aren't respecting his three-point shot, which likely won't happen, it's about being able to finish through contact in these areas. And this is the play you will see all throughout social media. He stonewalls a pick and roll with Malik Monk and Domantas Sabonis and is able to recover out to block Malik Monk's three and gets the hit-ahead pass and one dunk. That is the true package for CMB. It's physicality, it's tenacity, it's aggressiveness defensively, and just being a garbage man on the offensive end, at least as a rookie. Another activity-driven play where he doesn't give up on a possession, somehow miraculously saves the ball. The Kings defense is now in rotation, swing, and he is the benefactor. He also had 3 offensive rebounds tonight, including this one where he gets the tip-in layup. And so Collin Murray-Boyles, folks, was incredible in this game. As we welcome you inside the film room, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do the things you guys do to make sure this goes out to other people who are interested in Raptors content. Man, first of all, go Blue Jays, ALCS, the Yankees lose. Back to CMB. Really impressive game from him as a rookie. And, you know, you think of, like, when we went to training camp and Samson and I kind of discovered, we're like, hey, CMB is already with the second unit. It was a bit of a surprise to both of us, but not too much of a surprise just because of how his teammates were talking about him throughout camp. RJ Barrett was saying, you got to avoid that guy on the defensive end. Brandon Ingram talking about his tenacity. Scotty doing the same thing, talking about how physical he is. And CMB himself saying he's surprised how well he's keeping up physically. I think we've been able to see that over the first 2 preseason games, and that's why he's earned himself a rotation spot even immediately. Even despite the fact that he's the 9th overall pick, and obviously he will get prioritized developmentally. He's going to be a major focal point developmentally for the Toronto Raptors moving forward. He clearly has earned his keep here very early in the season, and that's a great sign for a good rookie season ahead for Collin Murray-Boyles. I think, 1, he will have the opportunity to and this is what I mentioned in my preview for Collin Murray-Boyles this season, his defense is a pathway for more minutes. He buys into the style of defense the Raptors want to play in such a major way. You saw it in those possessions with Domantas Sabonis, picking him up high on the floor, making sure that instead of catching it in the free throw line area, he is catching it above the break or at the three-point line area, just making things difficult on the guys that he's guarding. And I think that's such a telling point for what CMB can do, in the future when the offensive game, rounds out in a major way. I thought we saw moments there. It's great that he knocked down a three-point shot tonight. Seems like he's confident and willing to take the three, which is an encouraging aspect in itself. The finishing obviously will be a big part of his game. Cleaning up the offensive glass and getting offensive rebounds will be a massive part of his game as well. But super, super impressive night from Collin Murray-Boyles, who was a beast on both ends and just a battering ram defensively. He thrives causing chaos. And I think the Raptors, above anything else, especially on the defensive side of the ball, want to cause chaos this year. And I think the fact that he's actually active on the offensive end too, you can see him kind of being the connective tissue of actions, right? Even in the plays that I just showed you. And again, if you want to come and watch the YouTube version, you can watch the YouTube version of these. There is a visual component. Hope the audio listeners are doing well as well. You can see him being the connective tissue of some of these actions. So even when teams are giving him space above the break, he's weaponizing that space to run a dribble handoff with Ja'Kobe Walter, or run a pick and roll with Brandon Ingram, or, get Grady Dick going downhill. Like, he's able to use that added space to create space for one of his teammates. And I think that is a very, very telling quality. That's why he got himself to 6 assists tonight, is because he was such a willing passer and so willing to connect actions together. So, I'm excited for CMB's rookie year. I think there is a clear-cut rotation spot for him. I think he can only earn more and more opportunities. I'm very curious to see if they run him, because, in the first 2 games, he's guarded Nikola Jokic, he's guarded Domantas Sabonis to varying degrees of success. But those are 2 of the strongest players in the NBA. Basically everybody you talk to in the NBA says Sabonis is one of the strongest players they ever have to deal with. That's like one of his prevailing qualities as an all-star, former all-NBA guy, is just how strong he is. Jokic, 7 feet of just, size, right? He's so hard to overlook. That's why his playmaking is so good. And so he's guarded these bigger dudes. I'm very curious to see if we see more small ball CMB at the 5 just because of that, right? How comfortable-ish he's looked dealing with certain scenarios. I'm fascinated, man. I'm very curious to see how much we get in that kind of rotation spot, especially because the Raptors do have some lineup flexibility, and I mentioned it in the first preseason recap when it comes to Mamu. And by the way, someone said S can't pronounce Mamu. Sandro Mamukelashvili. Respect me, man. I can do it better than the broadcast can. Sandro Mamukelashvili. Sandro Mamukelashvili. Sandro Mamukelashvili. Respect me. Second of all, because of Mamu, they have a level of lineup versatility. They have a shooting option at the big man position. And so, yes, they can afford to play CMB more. They can afford to play Mobo more. Guys who aren't shooters but provide utility elsewhere as defenders, as passers, as guys who connect actions together. That's why CMB makes so much sense in that second lineup. That's why even when Jakob Poeltl didn't play tonight, Jonathan Mobo stepped in his place and started instead. And Ochai Agbaji started instead of Scotty Barnes because I don't think they want to mess with that second unit. That connection of Mamu and CMB works really, really well together. And I thought we saw that on display tonight. Another thing we saw on display tonight was the absolute shooting abilities of Brandon Ingram and RJ Barrett, who Brandon in 23 minutes had 21 points, made 5 of 7 3-pointers. RJ Barrett had 13 points in 23 minutes, knocked down 3 of 5 3-pointers. Also was 4 of 6 from the free throw line, which I guess is better than usual here. Both guys totaled for 7 assists total combined. I will say, I think one of the above the 3-point shooting, because let me just set the stage here. RJ, 37% catch and shoot player since he's been a Toronto Raptor. That's a very good number. Brandon Ingram, I remember I tweeted this a while ago in the summer. 75% of his total 3-point attempts in New Orleans came off of the catch. He knocked down 37% of those too. So he was just not a good pull-up 3-point shooter, and his quantity of pull-up 3-point shots went down. RJ, very similarly, not a great pull-up 3-point shooter, but the quality of his catch and shoot 3-point shooting has always been pretty good. And so you are seeing these guys thrive off of the ball, at least initially. And again, it's preseason. We're in preseason mode. Optimism is abound. But at the same time, I think it's really important that RJ and Brandon Ingram are knocking down their shots, especially off of the catch. Makes it make more sense when, this team does run a lot of off-ball actions that should create open shots like this, especially once Scottie Barnes is kind of fully acclimated to the type of role that he wants to play for this team. Another interesting aspect. But it's good that these guys are knocking down their shots at this rate. It's also good that BI and RJ, through 2 games, seem to have an understanding with one another on the floor. It seems like they have a chemistry, and this dates back to training camp when they've been paired together a lot through training camp. And I believe Sampson asked about what it's like being paired alongside one another. BI said he was surprised that RJ actually passed the ball. He thought he was just a chucker. And then, RJ crediting Ingram and saying that guy, the ball just gravitates towards him. Same thing. I believe RJ said the same. BI said the same thing about RJ as well. But those 2 guys clearly like playing with each other. And you could see it on the floor as well. As Ingram pushes it in transition, he's looking for RJ in that dunker spot to get him an easy layup. Or as RJ pushes in transition, he's looking for Ingram as the cutter, doesn't find him. Instead, Ingram is able to draw the attention and kick it out to RJ, who knocks down the above-the-break catch-and-shoot 3. And because the 2 of them together garner a lot of attention on the floor, when they're on the same side, the defense tends to shift, and so that creates a wide-open shot here for Sandro Mamukelashvili. Said it again, by the way. And when the offense kind of grinds to a halt, it's interesting that RJ and BI like to get into 2-man games for one another and try to get things going. And so I thought it was impressive that these 2 are working together well already. I think it's a telling sign for maybe what kind of lineups the Raptors can work in terms of staggering lineups, right? So in my head, the way I'm thinking of it right now, it's like, BI and Ja'Kobe should be staggered together. Those 2 should always play together. And I know that RJ and Ja'Kobe have a really good chemistry. And so you think, okay, if BI and RJ have good chemistry, and BI and Yak will probably have good chemistry, and RJ and Yak have good chemistry, those 3 should probably spend a good amount of time together on the floor. And then I think Scottie and IQ makes sense as a pairing. And so that's your stagger right there. You go Scottie IQ plus maybe Mamu and CMB and Ja'Kobe or Gradey or someone. And then you have your BI, RJ, Ja'Kobe, Ochai, and someone else, maybe Sandro lineup, right? And like those are your 2 lineups that you go in between as you go from starter to bench. Just an idea, just kind of floating it out there. That's one of the things that you sort of look for in preseason. It's like, all right, what buttons does Darko Rajakovic like to push when it comes to the Raptors rotation? But I do think that the BI RJ pairing is an interesting development. It's something to keep an eye on. And it's something to watch for as Scottie Barnes returns to the fold, and how that all looks together is very interesting as well. From the positives outside of Brandon Ingram and RJ Barrett, who were excellent, and CMB, who I think was the story of this game, Gradey Dick and Jacoby Walter had really, really good games as well. They combined for 29 points, and they did so on 14 shots. And Part of that was, 3-point shooting. They knocked down 3 combined threes. I thought Ja'Kobe was excellent defensively at the point of attack. He's also one of those guys who just fits into the identity of what this team wants to do defensively. Similar to CMB, excellent ball pressure, good job of making life difficult on ball handlers at the point of attack, being a pest, right? Gradey, I thought, was actually pretty good defensively today. I thought, for the most part, he did a good job off of the ball, utilizing his length, getting his hand in the cookie jar for certain situations, active hands. And so he had a couple of poke outs. He had a couple of deflections. I thought that was good. The on-ball stuff, from what I remember, not the greatest. But I thought he had a very good offensive game where we saw him attack closeouts multiple times. And like he was stronger. He actually bullied a couple of guys towards the end of the game, which was good. Crashed the offensive glass, worked in transition, was an excellent cutter. And they both knocked down their shots. And so I think, obviously there's going to be tons of competition in that area. I mentioned that Ochai started as well. He played 20 minutes, 7 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, etc., or 1 assist. But I think it's a good thing that these guys are available for the Toronto Raptors. This is a team that shot 20 of 37 from 3 tonight. They had an excellent 3-point shooting game. They're not going to shoot like that all the time. But when they do shoot like that, it's because they're ancillary guys, they're rotation pieces in Ja'Kobe, in Gradey, in Sandro, in Ochai. Those guys are knocking down their shots. Now, of course, like BI and RJ combining for 8 threes tonight is excellent. You hope for that every night. But at the same time, it is the rotational pieces that got to keep knocking down their shots. And if you can get, 29 points from Ja'Kobe and Gradey is probably too much to ask for on a night-to-night basis. But if you can get like 20 to 25 points, let's go with 30. If you can get 30 points a night from the combination of Gradey, Ja'Kobe, and Ochai, you're in a pretty good spot. I think you're in a really good spot in terms of the wing rotation for this team, because that means they knocked down shots. That means they played decently on defense for them to stay on the floor. That means that they were doing things outside of knocking down shots too. And so if you get that type of production from them, it makes life easier for the rest of the team as well. And that was pretty much it, folks. It was an interesting end to the game just because, the 2 G League lineups went head to head. Maxime Reynaud and Nick Clifford and all those guys were trying to make a push for the Sacramento Kings. I thought Chucky Hepburn was pretty cool, calm, collected. I'm excited to see how that 905 roster looks. I'm very curious to see if AJ Lawson ends up staying with the 905, maybe making the roster for the Raptors, or honestly, maybe getting an opportunity elsewhere. Very curious to see what happens with AJ Lawson, but it's good that the Raptors won this game, of course, on Blue Jays night. I think the main headlines from the Raptors' perspective, BI, RJ, chemistry, great. They knocked down a bunch of shots. They continue to shoot well in preseason. Another great sign. Their rookie, Collin Murray-Boyles, looking like he plays the part, like he fits in, like he's clearly deserving of all the rotation minutes he's about to get this season. Gradey and Ja'Kobe, really good games, knockdown shots. We're basically working within the seams of the offense while also being active and good on the defensive end. That is the vision for this Toronto Raptors team, for all of those things to make sense together. And I think we got a better idea of how it would look on a winning night for the Toronto Raptors. That's sort of the way they would win. That what you saw versus the Kings is the way they would win. Friday against the Boston Celtics, I will be there watching. We'll see how that looks. Very interested to see Chris Boucher, the return of Chris Boucher to Toronto. We'll see if Scotty and Yaka play in that game as well. But as always, like, comment, subscribe, do the things you guys do on the video side to make sure this gets out to other people. 5-star rating for the audio listeners. Give us some love. This is coming out before the Pull Up Trey podcast, but definitely be on the lookout for an episode with myself, Samson, and Trey. We did our annual awards draft for the Toronto Raptors, where we pick out certain awards where we think the Raptors might win. It's a lot of fun. We do it every year. They might actually win some awards this year, which is cool. So, folks, see you guys later. Enjoy yourselves. Take care. Bye-bye.